My name is Tony Robinson. I am the Chief Revenue Officer here at Cōr Concierge Health, and I have the pleasure of sitting down today with Mr. Paul Alberon, our Chief Legal Officer and Chief Operating Officer. Pleasure to have you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
No, I think this is a great opportunity to sit down today and discuss the telehealth industry, discuss some of the unknowns about the industry, and talk about just a macro level overview of what is driving industry decisions, what are the pros of the industry, the cons, and how are we working here at Cōr to make all of them better. I think the best place to start this conversation is on the macro level and trying to understand the industry a bit more. So can you give us an overview of the telehealth industry specific to peptides, HRT, and overall providing care across 50 states within the United States?
Yeah, it's interesting in the sense of, what is the industry? I think the industry is still trying to figure itself out. Oftentimes when I speak to people about what we do and in the sandbox we play in, I say, this industry is like a preteen. It's about to be a teenager. Soon will get its driver's license. And so not only will regulations be molding how this goes, the players in the market are going to drive how it goes. And there's several different folks at play. You have big players like big national companies, some publicly traded, who are operating at scale. Very vertically integrated. They have co-owned or wholly owned subsidiaries that are pharmacies. Multiple physician groups across the country in different states that they're partnered with, oftentimes exclusively. And on the other spectrum is you have people who are going to use services that provide the connector for all of these things. So you might go to a company that has a set of providers, that has a network of pharmacies you can order for, that has a relationship with a lab. So a little bit more plug and play. And then there's everything in between.
Right. What do you see as the barrier to entry right now? Because in the past, we've seen there's all these startups who make the same claims as the big company, but as you and I know, they're not able to maintain the level of regulation and scrutiny that we believe is evolving within this industry.
Yeah, and I'm not sure it's the fault of those smaller players and that they're misrepresenting or lying or anything like that. I think they just don't know. You really don't understand the complexity of making all of these pieces. If you want to do it yourself, making all of these pieces fit together in a legally compliant way that is going to sustain itself over time. It's hard to know. I mean, there are not a lot of attorneys in this country either who are like, oh yeah, we know the peptide industry,
right,
the compounding pharmacy industry. I mean, even compounding pharmacies, they were developed to address allergies in a brand name or common drug that somebody couldn't take, or a different form or something like that. So even the function of the industry of where we have now was not designed to get to where it's at, and provides a very interesting, complex network of challenges to solve that are really hard to navigate.
You mentioned compounding pharmacies, and this is a term that is thrown out a lot. Can you actually explain what a compounding pharmacy is, what the original intention was, and how we use it as a tool within the overall ecosystem?
Yeah, so compounding pharmacies, I go through a little history. I think it was, go back in time to around the 1930s. Compounding pharmacies, and just pharmacies in general. You walk downtown, and you had your local mom and pop shop that were making medications right there and then. I think it was sometime in the late 1930s, maybe it was like 1938, where the idea of a compounding pharmacy really came to light. As that developed over time, they've been called specialty pharmacies, compound pharmacies, what have you. A little different from the retail chains that everybody else is used to. But a compounding pharmacy was designed to, for example, say I needed to get a drug to treat a condition that I would typically go to my CVS for. But for whatever reason, I'm allergic to an ingredient in there. A compounding pharmacy has the raw materials. They are able to get that, and they're pharmacists, to formulate a version of that otherwise commercially available drug so that I can take it without the ingredient that I may be allergic to. So that was originally what compounding pharmacies were for. They were to be able to provide a solution to people who might not be able to take a commercially available drug for whatever reason. And that really developed over time until I believe it was the late 90s. The FDA governed all compounding pharmacies at that point in time. In the late 90s, Congress had made a decision that we're going to leave the regulation and oversight of compounding pharmacies to the states. And that was actually very against what the current FDA, then current FDA director wanted. And that's what we're left with today is
Right.
50 different states regulating thousands of compounding pharmacies in different ways.
Within our industry of telehealth, the word compounding pharmacy is thrown out a lot, both in good ways, but also as accusations of lacking safety and efficacy. So how would you explain to someone who doesn't understand what it is that the products offered are safe and they are effective and they are highly scrutinized and regulated?
Yeah, it's interesting. By definition, the FDA considers anything that comes from a 503A compounding pharmacy is not FDA approved for safety or effectiveness. Part of that's because the FDA doesn't directly oversee 503A compounding pharmacies. The FDA does oversee 503Bs, and we can get into that a little bit later. And so the reliance then goes to these state pharmaceutical boards, which some are more active than others are. So in terms of the question why it's interesting is it's not just a clear and cut shop that, hey, this is coming from a 503A compounding pharmacy, that it actually is necessarily safe. Because depending on the state that you're in, it might be easier to get a license than otherwise. So the most important part about this is not just, it comes from a 503A compounding pharmacy. It really comes in from, is the company you're working for or working with to be able to get these, have they gone to that pharmacy?
Right.
Do they know the people there? Have they seen their standards and operating procedures? Are they testing things the right way? It's much more hands-on than beats the eye.
And as we've started down this journey of launching Cōr, we've seen the entire spectrum. We've seen the people that do it right, and we've seen the people that are running this out of a storage unit and are almost mixing the product in bathtubs. And that's where you come across the phrase research peptide. Mm-hmm. And can you explain a little bit more about what exactly a research peptide is, the overall intended use of it, and what people have kind of abused it for?
Yeah, a research peptide is a workaround to any regulation to be able to sell peptides or whatever they might be to the general public under the guise of, hey, this is not for human use. This is for animals or for research use only. So don't put it in your body. But we all know when you go on one of those websites, it's an
Yes.
e-commerce website, and it looks good. The vials look cool. They're meant for human use.
Right.
You've seen this happen in other industries. Specifically in this industry, you saw it happen with SARMs in 2012, 2013, 2015, where people were doing this and they got in trouble. There were a couple indictments on the West Coast, like in Washington, as it related to SARMs. You see it with things like fake cannabis, for example. So like for a long time, people were talking about bath salts and stuff like that you go buy at a gas station, especially when cannabis was really super heavily regulated. And you go in and you get a little packet and it said research only, or it'd say potpourri. Yep. It is the method that is been tried and true for folks who want an easy button to be able to sell these types of products, which people want and oftentimes people need, but without having to go through all of the important pieces to make sure these things are at least somewhat safe.
Right.
And so research peptides are simply that. Are there companies out there that are doing research, quote unquote research peptides that may be more reputable than others. I'd like to think so. But you don't have that, whether it's state oversight or federal oversight, that requires rigorous testing of small batch sizes. And not just for the stability of the product, but the environment of which these things are created. And so you just don't know.
So if I'm new to this industry, I've heard about peptides, I've heard about telehealth, and I'm trying to take this serious. And I go out there and I don't understand what I'm doing. I'm reading a lot of articles with conflicting information. What would you tell someone that actually wants to find a reliable source? How do you tell someone to check the boxes and make sure they're putting safe and effective products in their body?
Well, first I would tell them to come to Cōr. But I would really be looking for the players out there that are very transparent. Who do they work with? Why do they work with them? One really kind of easy rule of thumb is there have been these private companies that have come into play, like LegitScript, which is a certification program that goes really, really deep into, everything from where do you source products, from what are your procedures for making this particular product into a prescription product that gets delivered to someone. So certifications can help, because it gives an added level of diligence on these particular players, in what they're doing and how they're doing it.
What do you see as the red flags that average person should look for when they're doing this research?
No transparency, that you don't know. You go on a website and they're offering this solution, but they're not telling you what pharmacy it comes from. Right. They're not providing any backings of why the certain products that they're offering them for. You don't see a provider on there. Basically, the people who you don't know who you're working with, because on the first spot that you go to research this particular company, you can't see any of it. It's probably a red flag.
Absolutely. And we see that at Cōr all the time. A lot of people have worked with other companies. They had questions and they were unable to get their questions answered. And that's something that we pride ourselves on through our advocates is we will take as much time as necessary to answer your questions, to provide that transparency, and to allow you to feel comfortable before you put anything in your body.
Yeah, and part of that really comes from building really good relationships with your partners, because you can go and treat this as an industry where you just have a bunch of different vendors you're using.
Right.
And that's great, that can work. But if you aren't building a relationship with those vendors, whether it be, physician group, providers, and getting to know them and having that rapport with your internal team, like our advocates, where they can share information, learn from each other. Same goes for the pharmacy side, where you're bringing that communication between the pharmacy and the advocates and the clinician. Having everybody speak to each other is a great way to get informed. And I think those types of relationships and seeing a company that embraces these relationships is much more than just vendor relationships, lends its way to feeling a little bit more comfortable in this industry with knowing I trust these folks.
No, that's all very interesting. And having spent the past 20 years within the healthcare industry, specifically medical devices and pharmaceutical products, what we see typically is the FDA requires stringent clinical research to prove both safety and efficacy. And this is something that we don't necessarily see within the peptide space. Why exactly is that?
Yeah, so there are some peptides that have gone through that rigorous process. Part of the drug manufacturing and pharmaceutical industry is there needs to be an appetite to bring that product to market. And there's, as you know, a ton of investment, tens of millions of dollars in years of preclinical trials, phase 1s, phase 2s, phase 3. So some peptides that are available now have gone through that and are part of an approved drug, right? And then there are a host of others that might not have a robust body of human studies, a body of human studies, clinical trials, phase 1s, phase 2s, phase 3s. But it's not the case that nobody's paying attention to it and saying, I'll just put this in your body and it might work. The safety and efficacy things are safety, not as hard, right? You have a lot of independent organizations and institutes that have really embraced the education and collaboration among providers and pharmacists and experts to be able to share this type of knowledge. One thing that's frustrating to me is that regardless of whether there are clinical trials, there are tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people utilizing some of these products. So there is data to be had.
Right.
And the problem being is, which is why this industry is very complex, there is not a method from a federal framework or a governmental framework of being able to utilize that information to be able to show, one, that these things are safe, or two, which is what is very hard to do and why clinical trials can be helpful, shows that they're effective, right? Traditionally, when a pharmaceutical company is going out there to make a drug, it's one endpoint, right? They're making this drug to, stop this particular cell from growing that relates to this specific cancer. So when you're doing clinical trials, you're focused on one little thing that you can control a little bit better. A lot of peptides that are out there, they can be effective for a lot of different things, right? So it's hard to be out there and say, oh, something like Pentadeca or BPC 157 is effective for inflammation. There are a lot of factors out there that determine whether something's effective for inflammation or not.
We see this all the time as people will come to us for one usage of a product. Yet there are multiple benefits that this product will provide. So it is a bit harder to put peptides into these categories that are nice and clean because there are so many benefits to them out there.
Yeah, and you really need to be working with people who are dedicating their time to understand these things, that are collaborating with institutes, with working groups, other providers, pharmacists, those types of things. They're not just out there to, hey, I'm a licensed doc, let's just get this stuff out there and get it in people's hands. You want people who are invested in this because they care and because they've seen the effects that some of these products have had on their own patients, and they want to learn more, and they want to be able to be out there and educate other people. So, I mean, again, it really goes into having really trusted relationships with people and sharing this wealth of information. Because until there's a solution, whether it's a regulatory solution or something else, to meet those standards, which maybe they're not the same, the standards we should be looking at moving forward. Maybe there's a different process. And you can see the current administration really leaning into that idea, utilizing AI to kind of fast track these things to make it less expensive for players to enter into this market. So that could be a benefit. I mean, that could be a real opportunity to reduce the cost, not just by dollars, but by time in arriving to some more concrete evidence that people who maybe don't know a lot about this stuff and still are on the edge may feel more comfortable with.
And that's something I think you'll see as a major differentiator for the legitimate companies and the non-legitimate is the ones who truly believe in what they're doing, believe in their operational pipeline. I think you will see will lean into more clinical research moving forward.
I mean, I think that's a huge opportunity. Because like I said earlier, whether people like it or not, people are going to take this stuff. And so from an objective standard, you might as well be doing some research and understanding the wealth of data that can be gathered from this. And so I think there is a huge opportunity for folks who really do want to lean into this, and for companies in this industry who want to lean in and understand more, to be able to utilize that to provide even more legitimacy to what this industry is looking to provide to people all across the country.
Absolutely. Traditionally in the United States, the primary care provider has been the quarterback for everyone's health care. It's the starting point. It's where you get referred to specialists. It's the primary decision maker, I would argue, across most of healthcare. Being in telehealth, there's a lot of contradictory information typically coming from those primary care providers. We see varying levels of understanding about peptides, the benefits, the regulations, the industries. What are some commonalities you've seen, and what do you hope for the industry moving forward that primary care doctors can help spur this advancement within healthcare?
I mean, lack of knowledge is the primary factor. There are a lot of primary care providers out there who have no idea what a peptide is.
Right.
Not because they're ignorant and they don't care. It's because they're busy. And the traditional medical profession has been treat condition, move on. Okay, you're good? All right, great. I'll see you, for your annual physical next year. What we're seeing with this industry is a focus not just on sick care, but on proactive care.
Right.
Obviously the ideas of longevity, reducing inflammation, anti-aging has spurred a new interest where you're seeing a lot of folks who were traditionally primary care providers now leaning into this idea of like, I don't just want to keep seeing these patients that come in that are sick. I don't want them to be sick at all.
Right.
And that's a really shocking approach to an industry that has, from pharmaceuticals to providers, has been built upon.
Correct.
Treat this one issue. And so, with primary care providers, I think, there's a blind spot because there's a lot of work to do in the day to day. And how do you find the time to really spend that to learn about this stuff? And where are they going to learn it from? Now, as this industry grows, there's more opportunities and more vehicles for that information to get out there. But I think the primary issue is you see I would not say most, but a lot of primary care providers, they just don't know, what these are and what the benefits are. More are knowing it as this industry evolves.
Absolutely. And one of the major eye-openers for myself within this industry has been the fact that if you look at the goal of the primary care physician, many times it's to get the individual back to normal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No one's measuring whether normal was good or not.
Yeah.
Normal might have sucked. And that is the beauty of telehealth that we've seen, is by using a data-driven approach and by using true blood work as the measuring stick for decisions which are made, you're able to not only get them back to normal, but then optimize. And so many times we see people who did not even know how good they could feel. They didn't know that they were suffering from lack of energy. They were just told, this is the new normal for you. And that's absolutely not true. And we see it every day. And that's where I hope here moving forward, the primary care physicians can buy into this, because we can be a true tool that allows us to do what the industry states, which is preventive medicine.
Yeah.
Now, this is a popular phrase, but at the same time, the actions don't align with what is being talked about from a clinical standpoint.
Yeah, no, that's interesting, particularly because when you think about blood work and what are reference ranges and what is normal, is just based upon historical data of what folks in, the age range of 35 to 45. If you're 35 to 45, your testosterone levels are usually around this spot. This doesn't mean they're optimal.
And this is one of the reasons that I absolutely love my job at Cōr, because not only do we see people fixing problems, but we see people regain their love for life. We see the mom who is typically exhausted by 3 p.m, able to have the energy to truly appreciate the time with her family. We see the executive who pours all their day into their company and would come home and not have the energy to truly be the best dad, the best husband. And once you see people regain that light in their eyes to truly love life, that is when you see people become a mouthpiece for the industry. You can do all the marketing you want, but an individual that everyone around them has seen them come home and regain that passion for their marriage and that passion for being a father and have the energy to truly be present throughout the course of their day, that's a beautiful thing. And I think that's something that energizes us all. Is we can sit here and we can talk about clinical outcomes and we can talk about improvement in blood work. But when someone's able to get pregnant, who was not able for years, and when we see someone who came home from work for years and they just sat down on the couch and they were not present around the people that mattered most, those are the things that are the biggest mouthpiece for your company. And those are also the people who then recommend you to their spouses, recommend you to their cousins, to anyone who will listen, because sadly, within healthcare, we don't see that much anymore. We see there's a problem, they go, they put a Band-Aid on it, and then it may come back. Where within telehealth and within specifically peptides and HRT and TRT, we see people actually fixing problems and taking their life to that next level. And that's one of the things that I absolutely love about what I do.
Yeah, I totally agree. Because it doesn't need to just be, this is the new normal, just
Right.
because that's what it's been,
Yeah.
right? It's about saying, okay, that might be the new normal in the sense of that's just what it's
Yes.
been forever.
Yep.
But the new normal should be, let's figure out to get you to feel the way where you can go home and maybe you're, you had kids later in life. And you can go home from a late day of work and throw ball with your kid out in the backyard.
No, we see that all the time. And that's a beautiful thing is the goal for us is not to put a Band-Aid on it. It's to make you a little better today than yesterday and give you the hope that tomorrow is going to be a little bit better than today.
Yeah, and some of these things can be minor tweaks, and some of these things are just not caught at the primary care physician. The more touch points and the more availability you have with people who know what they're doing here, whether it be, folks like advocates, whether it be, clinicians and providers, the ability to pick up your phone or shoot a text to someone, I think that's what's really changing this industry, is because think about how hard it is to get into a doctor's office.
It's a nightmare. It's an absolute nightmare.
In fact, I don't even know how to do it that well anymore because I call in, I get a receptionist, and then maybe in 2 weeks I can get in.
Are you in network? Are you not in network?
Yeah.
Is this the person you can see? Can I not? No, I totally get it. And it's a frustration we see people come with all the time. I always tell individuals, we pick up where healthcare dropped off.
Yeah.
We pick up where healthcare is failing people. And one of the biggest advantages that we bring is availability.
Yep.
We have what we call our core advocates, who is that personal individual that you can text, you can call at any time. And you know what? If they don't have the answers, they can get you in touch with a clinician who will get you the answers you need. And a lot of companies say they offer that. That is where we really hang our hat and take pride that they truly will help you whenever you need them.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is folks just want someone to talk to about this. And it's a lot better to be able to talk to someone when you want to talk to them,
Right.
who will listen, and then know that if they're not a licensed professional or anything like that, they know exactly where to go. They know that person. That's a great point. Thank you for reaching out about that. Let me go talk to the provider. And in that type of interaction, that individual feels so much better because one, someone listened to them.
Right.
Two, they got a hold of them. And then three, within 24 hours, maybe 10 hours, maybe 10 minutes, they're gonna be like, "Hey, talk to the doc. Let's get on a phone call with the doc. Let's get on a phone call with the NP, and let's talk about this."
And in my experience, many times they just want to know that something's normal, especially with peptides, especially with HRT. That just having the ability to call and go, "Hey, I'm experiencing this," whether it's a positive, whether it's a negative, they can get an answer and say, "Hey, do I need to change what I'm doing?" And that is where we provide real-time care. Maybe we need to titrate something back. Maybe this is perfectly normal and many people experience this, but just having that peace of mind where you can call someone and get an answer and go, "This is going to be fine," or "Let's pivot right now." This is a huge advantage that traditional healthcare does not offer.
Yeah, hey, maybe this thing isn't working.
Right.
Let's stop it.
And that's where blood work comes into play, is by following up on your blood work, we have a baseline. We can say, look, this current protocol is doing absolutely what we want it to, or it's not, but now we can pivot. The word telehealth has become, a major topic here in recent years. What do you see as the leading driver to that boom?
COVID, for sure, because it was a scenario where people weren't leaving their homes. I mean, I think we all remember what COVID was like, and so telehealth didn't start during COVID, but it certainly became the primary vehicle during COVID, which led to a huge boom in not just doing primary care or, hey, I'm sick and you do this. It gave an opportunity for physicians and providers to lean into this opportunity where they said, wow, this is really working, and I can help more people. I can be more available.
It's scalable.
And scalable, 100%. And so I certainly think, as horrible as that time was for a lot of different reasons, that was a big catalyst to what telehealth has become today.
Well, need drives advancement within healthcare. And that's one thing that COVID did create, was a need for the ability for people to receive healthcare in an efficient manner. And I think we just see a continuation of this, and we constantly see improvements within the IT side of things, within the operational side, within the pharmaceutical side of these. It's continuous advancement based on need. And again, we saw a need, and that's what we tried to create Cōr based on. It wasn't, we didn't see dollar symbols. We didn't see, an opportunity to sell a product. We saw an opportunity to meet a need within healthcare. And I think that's massive. And I think it drives most quality advancement that we see within the industry today.
Yeah, I mean, it provides an opportunity to seize on that opportunity of all these tools, of the acceptance of these technologies, the methodology, in how you can access so many different aspects of the healthcare industry, whether it be your labs, whether it be a doctor, whether it be a pharmacy, from the comfort of your home. And so it'd be foolish to not seize on that opportunity to help more people in different places.
Absolutely.
A lot of the peptide stuff was really started to kind of evolve after SARMs and PEDs. There was a whole period of time there where people were trying to enhance their performance, whether you were a major league baseball player or you were the guy who was trying to make the varsity team, whatever it may be. So I think a lot of it started there, and obviously there was a cloud on that, which really led into media engagement and anti, performance related things. Not that people should be taking steroids necessarily to improve muscles, that's going to be healthy. Sometimes those are people's choice on what they want to do. But I think that's where you see a lot of folks who are starting to hear about peptides and they're just like, oh, is that just a PED? Yeah. Is that just how I can hit 3,000 home runs in my career? And it's really not. And what we're seeing now is a lot of more people are like, oh, I know what a peptide is, because they've seen, the GLP-1 ads.
Yes.
They've seen the craze for what that looks like. And that's a peptide. Yep. And so, the industry's very young, but it's continuing to grow. The awareness of it based on the solutions, just one peptide, which is a GLP-1 like Ozempic can provide, has really started to get just the normal folks understanding, like, oh, that's a peptide.
For me, what I saw very early on was you had the well-respected individuals, the Joe Rogans, the Andrew Hubermans, talking about these. But then there was this misconception that only the ultra-wealthy could have them available. And we still see that. We have a lot of people that will call into us and they will say, you know what, I'm interested in this, but I can't afford these. And what they don't realize is many peptides are extremely affordable. And when you calculate in the preventative nature of them, they can often be cost savings. Yeah. Because we talk to blue collar individuals all the day who think they can't afford these. But once you calculate the missed work from back injuries or just the overall exhaustion from, strenuous activities, they realize they almost can't afford not to use peptides.
Right. I mean, you pay, most people in this country pay an insurance premium, for single families, a single person, upwards of $10,000. If you have a family, you're paying, if you don't have employer sponsored coverage, you're paying, $20,000, sometimes $30,000 a year. A lot of peptide offerings out there, cost a fraction of that when you look at it at an annual basis. And so for folks who are willing to take control of their health care and be proactive, you're right. It can be a cost savings because, you're not having to meet your deductible,
Correct.
Because you broke your knee because you're getting a little older and your
Yes.
bone mass is lighter because you might have a hormone imbalance,
Yep.
right?
And when you pay that $10,000 for your insurance coverage, it doesn't guarantee you're going to be getting better. That's a risk mitigation, where when you take a proactive approach and look at your blood work and implement a protocol which fixes the problems you know you have, which optimizes other levels, that's a proactive nature that is going to save you money.
Well, yeah, the insurance premium is just there if you need it. You don't get anything with it, right? You only get it when you need it.
Yep.
And hopefully you don't need it, but it's a significant expense on folks,
And I think there's
obviously.
even risk associated with the course of care. How many times do you see someone goes in with an injury, and before they can get physical therapy, they have to take medications which have a negative side effect. Before they can get a surgery, they have to go through 4 months of physical therapy, which the injury could possibly be getting worse. So there is a process which is money driven versus outcome driven. And that is something that, again, I believe we at Cōr fill that gap, is we can sit here and go, hey, we can't guarantee we're going to fix something, but we can start something next week that can potentially help fix this problem.
Right, and the traditional model has, whether by design or just as a consequence of it.
I hear a lot in the news and on social media about peptides being banned. What's driving this conversation?
So peptides being banned is a result of a regulatory schema that is not fit for what this industry has become. Because you remember, 503As were meant to primarily provide a different solution for someone who might be allergic to, or might not be able to take that form of a drug. The regulations have not caught up to the industry. And so the idea of the regulations that govern compounding pharmacies, and there's two. There's 503As and there's 503Bs.
What are the difference between those two?
Yeah, so a 503A is typically going to be a smaller operation, but as this industry's grown, they've gotten a lot larger. One, they're regulated by the states. Two, they are the pharmacies that are able to, and only able to, write a prescription for a specific individual. They operate on various different guidelines outside of the states, which include USP guidelines. So for example, a 503A, when they're making a particular product, they can only do that in batches of 250 vials.
Okay.
Like that's
which
the
is
rule.
not a lot within our industry.
That is not a lot. I mean, when you have tens of millions of people every day trying to get these types of products. 250 vials in a batch, that takes a long time to do. It is not a lot. A 503B pharmacy is what can be considered like an outsourcing facility. Now, 503Bs, contrary to how the 503As work, are regulated and licensed and overseen by the FDA directly. So there's only about 80, maybe 85 now in the entire country. And what those do is they're making these particular medications in bulk, right? So they're shipping them to hospitals, doctors' offices. They cannot ship to an individual patient.
So they're the ones following good manufacturing practices.
Exactly.
They're the ones who are following the same level of scrutiny that Big Pharma necessarily would.
That's exactly right. So current good manufacturing processes, it's a pain, right? Because it's a ton of work.
Yes.
Everything from when a pharmacist walks in the door to when they walk out of that door to clock out for work needs to be documented. And so it's a very intense, and by the way, all this stuff changes too.
Daily.
of what that is. And so it is really hard to run a good operation like that. There's a lot of investment in time and money and in people to get those to run. That's why, perhaps there's only 80 to 85 of them in the country. But interesting that you mentioned that about current good manufacturing processes. Is when maybe you're in this industry and you're looking to get into it, or you're a client who is trying to validate, who do I go with? Just because a 503A pharmacy doesn't need to operate according to current good manufacturing processes doesn't mean they shouldn't strive to do that.
Right.
And there are a lot of good folks out there who go above and beyond, even though it's not a requirement, to do those things, to have every second of the day in an SOP and followed, to make sure the equipment's clean, to make sure the ventilation is perfect. One, it's easier because when the state comes in to do an inspection, you got your I's dotted and your T's crossed.
And that's something I hope people take away from this conversation today is you need to be comfortable asking questions.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something we embrace at Cōr is we're happy to answer these questions. If you're dealing with another company and they seem like they're skirting around the topic or feel uncomfortable telling you these details, I hope that throws a red flag.
Yeah, and you want to work with companies who are putting in the work themselves to ask those questions. Right. Flying out, to the pharmacy and getting to know these people, seeing where it's made, how it's made. Because something that's interesting is the only reason 503Bs were created was, this kind of black spot on the compounding pharmacy industry is it was about 2012. There was a huge outbreak of meningitis that killed like over 100 people.
Yep.
And in fact, here in Michigan, like about 19 people died. And it was a 503A compounding pharmacy that didn't have, good SOPs in place. And those vials were contaminated with bacteria and people died. And so what happened from that was, legislative action, a lot of work to then create the 503B framework because that pharmacy was shipping across the country. And it wasn't the industry we are at today. And they created 503Bs to be able to manufacture at that scale, but to do it safely.
The word ban gets thrown around a lot within the peptide space. What does it actually mean? Are things actually banned? Are they just highly regulated? Like, can you tell me a bit more about what that word actually means?
I'm laughing because I think people would like to know what that means themselves. I'm not sure even the regulators know what it means. A lot of it goes back to the fact that this industry has evolved faster than the regulations.
Right.
The idea of what is called the bulks list, which is a list that is created by statute and part of the regulations, is supposed to be the list of ingredients that compounding pharmacies can use to make certain products. The bulks list has been in development since at least 2010, if not before. I mean, it's not done. It's not a finalized rule. And so when you have an industry starting to explode too, they're starting to make these things. And the regulators have tried to find a solution to be like, okay, we haven't finished the bulks list. Like how we're so they came up with these categories. Category 1, meaning, these ingredients are safe, not necessarily effective, but they're safe. You have category 3, which honestly, I don't remember what category 3 is. But you have category 2, which is where this whole idea of banned comes in from. And category 2 is where they have placed particular ingredients or peptides or products that the FDA has determined either they're harmful, and that can vary upon the information, but more often than not that there's not enough information to make a determination of whether these things are safe or effective. Now, where the FDA has struggled on this, and rightfully so, because it's not easy stuff, right? Is the two big things that they're concerned about is what they call immunogenicity concerns, which is necessarily tied to their second concern, which is API characterization. So what API is an active pharmaceutical ingredient. It is the raw product that gets combined with sometimes bacteriostatic water to create the prescription product in a peptide that you actually put in your body. What it really is about is understanding the conditions of how that API is manufactured. Because what the FDA is concerned about is that if this comes from a manufacturer of where they can't justify the impurities that's in that particular raw product, there then becomes the risk that when you, for example, if it's an injection, you inject that in your body, it ties into the next concern, which is you may have an immune response to that particular product. So instead of putting something in your body that'll help you, your body's going to start fighting it off, which nobody wants to happen. And so those two concerns have been, the primary issue that the FDA has wrestled with. And part of this is more research could be helpful, but also, ensuring that these manufacturers are state of the art. A lot of these products, as we know, that are on the ban list or where peptides are coming from, they come from overseas. It doesn't mean it's a bad thing.
So that doesn't mean if something comes from China, that doesn't mean it's necessarily bad.
That's correct. I mean, I hesitate to say most, but I would say most of the API in the world, or certainly what is used in the United States, comes from overseas. Specifically with peptides. And so these facilities, they do have to get registered with the FDA. So they follow a process where they have to give all of their SOPs, kind of like the current good manufacturing processes of how they make these products, and then they get registered. Now, you might have facilities that are registered but haven't passed an inspection.
Right.
And it's not the case that someone from the FDA flies out before registration and says, okay, yeah, you're making all this stuff, looks good. Well, they better not be making stuff if they haven't been registered yet, right? And so, it doesn't necessarily mean they're all bad. But when you have a particular facility, and you'll see this on good manufacturers who really care about this, they will put on their website, we just passed our FDA inspection. Because that is a mark of quality for these manufacturers, to where you can be like, okay, not only are they registered, they've passed 1, 2, 3 FDA inspections. Now, the ones you got to worry about are the ones who didn't let the FDA in the door.
Yep.
That's what you got to worry about.
Having spent a good portion of my career working directly with the FDA and having passed multiple inspections, I can tell you there's usually 2 types of companies. The ones who are dreading an inspection and the ones who are ready for it and are ready to hang their hat on the fact that they passed it.
I want to go with that one.
Exactly.
I want to go with that one.
Exactly. And it's all about preparedness. It's all about sitting here and setting up your system in a way that you have the know-how to pass and you have the know-how to understand what is actually being able to be achieved. And the 2 goals are safety and effectiveness. And what does that come through? Repeatability.
Yeah. Look, it's about putting in the work. It's about putting in the work at every single aspect of this industry. Much like to say why we got into this and how it can be easy to get in, but it's very hard to be good at. Because you got to put in the work. You got to know your vendors. You got to build the relationships with them, whether it's the pharmacy, whether it's the provider, whether it's the labs. It's putting in the work and making that repeatable that allows folks to say, I want to work with these folks. And those are the people you want to work with.
Now, having worked with you for the past 2 years, I'm very comfortable in saying I think you're probably one of the top legal minds within this space. Again, you won't say that. I know you're too humble, but I would say that. So I am sure there's a lot of opportunity out there for you. I'm sure there's a lot of big firms, big companies that would just love to have you. What drove you to make the decision to be part of starting Cōr?
Yeah, I mean, as I've gone through my career, you're right. I see that there is a big gap in folks, especially attorneys, who have dove in and understand the nuances of this industry. I could go out there and start something like that and work with people and bring them up. And it's not that I don't want to help this industry grow. I thought that, starting something like Cōr was more important to me to lead by example of how to do it right. I am not someone who thinks, we have competitors and I don't want to help them. I want to raise this industry up.
Absolutely.
And if we're going to do that, we might as well do it with our group and bring our competitors up by sharing, this type of knowledge. And then really the big thing of why I wanted to do something like start Cōr, as opposed to, going out and providing a ton of information to everybody and making a ton of money doing that, is because of the people. The people in this organization are not just dedicated to their work in getting the job done. They're dedicated to each other.
Absolutely.
They're dedicated to the partners, to staff, to external partners. That dedication in this group is why I wouldn't go anywhere else.
I think you're spot on. I think everyone here wants to set the standard, and that does not just come down to telehealth. That comes down to leadership, to making the healthcare industry better across the board.